Hello, everybody. Okay, welcome to this evening's briefing on using Farnborough airspace. This is primarily aimed, well, it's generally aimed at all pilots, but primarily aimed at people who use Blackbush. But as I say, it should be a useful resource for everybody, every pilot that wants to fly around the southeast of England. My head's in the way, so I'm going to move my head out the way and show you the little square on the bottom of the bottom of the half mil map, which shows quite a lot of busy airspace. Here it is on the Skydemon map, and you will see from there all the way down to there looks like it's controlled airspace all the way. So it's quite a daunting thing for people to look at if they're thinking of either transiting around the bottom, around the southeast of the London CTR, or just transiting it in any event. It's not actually as daunting as you might think, but before I go into that, let's just go into what Class D controlled airspace actually is. So here's my laser display screen, you can see there. Okay, I'm just going to talk about VFR flight in Class D airspace. Separation between visual and visual traffic and visual and instrument traffic is not given. So there's no separation given. So you're not under that sort of control. You do get information between visual traffic and other visual traffic, and you also get information about instrument traffic. So that's the only information you get in Class D airspace. Having said that, you have to be in there with permission. Air traffic control, of course, you get air traffic control. So if they ask you to do something, you're obliged to comply with those requests as long as it's safe to do so. And of course, as the pilot, as you remember from your PPL training, ultimate safety is down to the pilot in command of the aircraft. So if you cannot do it for any reason, you say, unable to comply due cloud ahead of me, due cumulus granitus ahead of me, or whatever it is. Minima is 5 kilometers visibility, which not many of us fly below anyway, and 1,000 feet away from cloud vertically and 1,500 feet away from cloud horizontally. That's throughout now. It used to be different below 3,000 feet, but that's no longer the case. If minima is outside that, you can get special VFR to fly in a CTR, but I'm not going to deal with that today. I'm going to point you at the end of this towards lots of resources. They're everywhere and they're a little bit confusing. So today's one, I'm trying to simplify things. So essentially, this is what Class D is. Class D airspace, you have to have permission to go in, you get information about other traffic, you're under air traffic control, which you have to comply with, unless you cannot do so for safety reasons. Okay, so back to this map here. If you fly around London, which a lot of us quite often do, the London Class A airspace starts at 2,500 feet. So you tend to do it at the safe take two recommendation of 200 feet below at something like 2,300 feet. Of course, if everyone flew that, we'd all be flying at the same height. So let's say we're going to fly at 2,315.2 feet for the purposes of this. We're below the London Class A controlled airspace, which you can't go in anyway, VFR. So if I strip out, so if you look at this airspace here, if I strip out everything below 2,500 feet, so if you're going around London and you want to continue down here, you can. There's nothing there. There is no controlled airspace in that below 2,000 feet, apart from the CTR of Farnborough and little bits either side where it goes down to about 1,500 feet. So if you want to transit at 2,300 feet, have a careful look at your half-mil chart or your quarter-mil chart, whichever you decide to use, and you will see that there is plenty of airspace to fly in below 2,500 feet, which is no big deal, as I say, because you've got to keep below that around Heathrow anyway. So if you're going to do that anyway, then there's nothing really to feel resentful about. However, if you want to fly higher than that, you are going to have to deal with this, which is, quite frankly, a bit of a dog's breakfast. If you look at, there's Farnborough airspace there, there's Farnborough airspace there, there's Farnborough airspace there isn't there, and there is there. Now, the reason behind that, again, if you're below 2,000 feet, it's not there at all. The reason behind that is they wanted their airspace to go up to the Class A, because they want people joining and leaving Farnborough to do it inside controlled airspace, in the comfort blanket of controlled airspace. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, because it is actually quite nice being in controlled airspace. For a start, if you do what you're told, you can't infringe because you're already there. So, so that's a good thing if you do it correctly, of course. It goes, so all of these bits of airspace are higher and lower in order for it to touch the bottom of the airspace above it. So it's really a fault of the airspace that's already there that this looks a little bit like a dog's breakfast. There were, use the correct grammar, Steve, there were plans to manipulate the airspace so that it's more sort of even with new aircraft with better performance and climb and descent rates and all the rest of it. They were going to rationalise controlled airspace, but I'm not entirely sure what happened with that plan. Excuse me, just a bit of vodka. That's better. So if you want to transit below 2,500 feet, you can, the only thing you've got to consider is the CTR. So you can fly up to here at 2,000 feet, ask for transit of their CTR, which is very easy, and they let you through. Going the wrong way, and they let you through. This here does extend down to the surface. You will all know that airspace that's shaded, apart from the panhandles of Max's, airspace that's shaded does extend to the ground. In fact, on Sky Demon, you'll see that the panhandles aren't shaded. So there you go. On this, all the shaded airspace extends to the ground. The rest of it doesn't. So looking at that there, that doesn't. Okay. But if you can just zip round, or avoiding the airspace, or you could zip up here, avoiding any controlled airspace below 2,500 feet. However, you can't go through here without talking to one of Farnborough or Heathrow. Now, don't be worried about Heathrow. Personally, I've never been refused a transit from Heathrow. They like to keep you low on the extended centre lines. The rest of the time, they're okay with transit. It's Class D airspace, same as Farnborough. So you've got exactly as much chance. So ask Farnborough first. If Farnborough say no, then talk to Heathrow. The frequencies at the top right-hand side of this handy little thing to write in that we usually use, and you can get your transit there. And as I say, they're very accommodating. And there is an internet resource to pre-warn them that you're applying for controlled airspace transit, and I'll publish those links after. So when I finish this broadcast, I'm going to publish a comment on this broadcast with all the links for you to click on and look at. Okay, so that's the airspace. I mean, it's not really terribly daunting to have a look at. As I say, below 2,500 feet, it is there's some at the door. Below 2,500 feet, most of it isn't there. So transiting controlled airspace in general is a call to the control of the airspace, Farnborough, asking for a zone transit. We've all come back from the south to Blackbush asking for ATZ transit. So Golf XXXX request ATZ transit. You got to say, you say the same. Instead of ATZ, you say CTR, request CTR transit. Now, I don't know if, I'm assuming all of you have requested controlled airspace transit in the past. The first thing they say is remain clear of controlled airspace. That doesn't mean no, you can't. That means wait till we've found out where we can fit you in, and then we'll give you transit. So you pass your details, you remain clear of controlled airspace until they say, yep, you can come in. This is how you've got to transit. So coming in from the south, let's start on this one. Put it in upside down, have I? No. So you're coming in from here, from around Haley Island, and you want to go back to Blackbush. I'm moving my pen the wrong way around here. Moving back to Blackbush, right over the Farnborough overhead. Okay, actually getting transit of their CTR and their ATZ. So you're about here. You're below 2,500 feet, so there isn't any controlled airspace to worry about. You're already on frequency with Farnborough on a basic service. So you just request your zone transit and then give them a route. Request zone transit direct Blackbush. Request zone transit via your overhead. Whatever. They know your route. They know you're going Blackbush to Blackbush or Blackbush to High Wycombe or wherever. And they will ask you to remain clear of controlled airspace before they give you your clearance. Then they'll give you your clearance. In other countries, two-way communication is your clearance for transit. I think the reason why they say remain clear of controlled airspace is that they are aware of that and they don't want anyone misunderstanding and entering the controlled airspace because they think they got clearance because there's two-way contact. So that may be the reason why. Someone can confirm that. So anyway, they give you your clearance at an altitude that you have to agree that you can fly, and a route that you agree that you can fly. If they want to, for instance, take you via Lasham's overhead here, that's not really advisable. So personally, I would say negative cannot comply due to possible gliding traffic. And if they then say there is no gliding traffic because they're closed due to COVID-19, then you can do it. But it's your decision as a pilot. Coming through here, as I said, you will have to get a transit from Farnborough or Heathrow. If you do get a transit from Heathrow, just be careful of the Fair Oaks ATZ, because even if you've got controlled airspace transit from Heathrow to go to their airspace, that doesn't necessarily mean you can transit Fair Oaks' ATZ. And rightly or wrongly, hello Chris, rightly or wrongly, any controlled airspace infringement is reportable as an MOR. That is not why the MOR scheme was brought up. There used to be a CAA document, a CAP, whatever it is, the MOR scheme, which explained why the scheme was brought up into existence, and it was brought into existence for safety purposes. But now it's all Eurocontrol that do it, and if you go to the MOR link on the CAA website, it will take you to an EASA form to fill in for an MOR. So anyway, for whatever reason they've chosen, any infringement will be reported as an MOR and investigated. Okay. Now, getting closer to Blackbush, here we have the old version of PowerPoint. We have Farnborough's airspace and Blackbush's airspace here, the ATZ, I mean. You will see that they're a funny old shape, and if you look at Farnborough, I'm going to talk about departing Blackbush, you will see VRP Fleet Pond there, and the VRP M3 Junction 4 there. If you're departing Blackbush to the north or the west, you don't need to worry about anything. I'll talk to you about that in a minute. If you want to transit the Farnborough CTR, and that's anywhere in this bit, so I'm going to see if I can go the right way there. There we go. No, I'm not going the right way. That bit there. Then everything below here is the Farnborough CTR control zone. So you will need permission to transit it, and you will see that part of the Blackbush ATZ's in there as well. But that's the local flying area. Anyone that's flies from Blackbush knows that we are allowed to fly in that area while the tower is open. So let's not worry about that. So when you want to get a transit, you book out with the tower as you normally would do. And instead of just saying where you want to go, say, I would like to transit the Farnborough CTR. They will do everything for you. They will call Farnborough. Farnborough will give them a score to give to you. And then when you're at the threshold, they give you all the Golf, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta is cleared to enter transit control airspace, blah, 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 blah. Then they will almost certainly ask you to hold at one of these points. Okay, so that is a clearance to enter controlled airspace. So when you're given the clearance, you take off, you leave the Blackbush ATZ, changing frequency, straight into the Farnborough control zone, which you are entitled to do because you have a clearance. But where do you have a clearance to? You only have a clearance to one of the VRPs. So before you get there, you have to have made contact with Farnborough. You are cleared to hold at the reporting point. So once you make contact with Farnborough, they'll almost certainly clear you further, or they might ask you to orbit a couple of times or something. And of course, if you haven't managed to get hold of them, if they're busy, then you've just got to orbit north of either Fleet Pond or Junction 4 of the M3. A lot of people have said, oh, that's dangerous. Everybody will be doing it. Not many people do it. You're not, there's not going to be hundreds of you. We might find, perhaps later on this year, if you have a fly up to the 2K and there are half a dozen of us, that there might be a reason to orbit north of Blackbush for a couple of goes until everyone's gone. But it's down to the pilot to do the safe thing, of course. You know, this is air traffic controllers. Sometimes it seems to me that they don't realise we have windscreens and we can actually see out the front and we can see what's going on. But we are pretty good at seeing and avoiding. But it's always nice to have a little bit of help every now and again from stuff like air traffic control and Sky Echo and stuff like that. Okay, so that's your, and of course then once you're inside the controlled airspace, you're in the comfort blanket of ATC. They're giving you information on other traffic. They won't give you any separation. They don't need to. It's not their right. It's only Class D. But they will give you information about other traffic they think might conflict with you. And they may well give you suggestions as to what to do. But you do have to comply with any ATC instructions, as I said, unless there's a safety element involved. Once you're getting towards the edge of controlled airspace, they will chuck you off radar control, which is what you're under in controlled airspace, back onto a basic service. And I'll guarantee you'll feel a little bit exposed when you're back outside controlled airspace. So it's not a bad thing to get a transit of controlled airspace. And when all this is over, I would recommend everybody to just give it a go of a transit. If you don't want to get initially, if you don't start initially getting the transit to depart from Blackbush, you've got nothing else to do, head to the west, get below 2,500 feet, zip down and across, and then get your controlled airspace transit coming back. And then when you've done that, then you can move on to the getting the departure transit. Heading elsewhere, heading to the west or heading to the north, noise abatement aside, and we all know about noise abatement at Blackbush and the particularly the very vociferous chap in Yateley who rings when someone comes to within 10 nautical miles of his house. He must be really missing us. Anyway, apart from the noise abatement, heading where you're not going to enter any controlled airspace is business as usual. You head west. If it's a direct departure, you just head west. You've got the odium mats to think about, but if you just turn 10-15 degrees to the right, you can avoid that, or you can talk to Farnborough and get mats penetration as soon as you've left the Blackbush ATZ. Don't forget that a mats is not civilian airspace, it's military airspace, so you don't actually have to ask, but it's always good manners to ask, and you don't want a tuna cut your chuff, do you? So a good idea to ask them for mats transition to be polite, because you may want to do an approach there in the future, and they do approaches now, so there you go. It's always nice to be nice. Heading to the north, if you're on to let's say you're on 07 actually, and you want to head to the north, you can't turn left because of Yateley, so you will have to climb out in the Blackbush circuit. I'm going to have to sort of look around the corner here. So there we go, we've got Blackbush, and I don't know if you will know, but there is a 10-degree offset now to avoid Yateley when you take off from 07. You can see it from that, and you'll be climbing into the LFA, into the local flying area. So number one, you've got to be squawking 7010. Otherwise, all the infringement tools go off at Farnborough, and they don't go off if you're squawking 7010. So that's the reason to do that. We are allowed in there, and you won't get. It's not an infringement if you don't squawk 7010, but you will hack them off of it. So you've got to climb to the overhead to depart, to keep outside of Yateley. So number one, squawk 7010. Number two, don't go past here. So stay this side of the M25, M25, what I'm talking about, M3, that's there. Don't know why it's not in this map. But if you can read that, Blackbush local flying area, surface to 2,000 feet. So that is goes from the surface to 2,000 feet, that says. But what that doesn't actually tell you is whether it's 2,000 feet above the surface. Well, it's not, it's 2,000 feet above mean sea level. So that could catch you out. So make sure you don't climb above 2,000 feet QNH. And if you're, for some reason, you're coming back in on the QFE, you've got to take 375 foot off the maximum height you can fly. Otherwise, you're infringing controlled airspace, and they will report it. So anyway, departing from here, watch the top of the local flying area. It's below the top of the ATZ, and just depart to the north as usual. So the only different thing you do there is watch out, number one, and number two, squawk 7010. And I don't know if you all know, but the dedicated Blackbush squawk of 0447 hasn't existed since this airspace came in. And so it's just 7,000, or as they're calling it, conspicuity. I'll tell you why in a minute. Or 4572, which is a listening squawk if you don't intend to talk to them. And don't forget, if you've got the listening squawk on, you have to be listening. So you do have to have their frequency set. And then they know that you're listening out to them, and they'll call you if they want to. Now, you've all heard about the when you've flown in the month between the airspace and the lockdown, that when you leave Farnborough, they don't say squawk 7,000 anymore. They say squawk conspicuity. The reason behind that is it's not personal. It's nothing to do with us. It's worldwide. If you listen out, you'll hear people quitting the frequency to go, for instance, to Shoreham or to Solent or something, and they'll say squawk conspicuity, free call, da-di-da-di-da. Conspicuity does not mean 7,000. Conspicuity is a dedicated code for a particular place you're in, and outside controlled airspace, it's 7,000. In an ATZ, it's 7010, and there are various other conspicuity codes. There's an IFR conspicuity code. There's a coming in from another FIR conspicuity code, which I can't remember any of them. What they don't want to say is Squawk 7000, free call Blackbush. When you get to the edge of the ATZ, Squawk 7010, it's a right mouthful, and there's people waiting to get in. So even though conspicuity is hard to say, you need to practice. So yeah, so maybe during the lockdown we can see who can say conspicuity the best. It'll be a nice competition to have. Okay, so that's leaving the ATZ to the north and the west. Absolutely nothing to worry about. So I'm just going to really summarize now, because I've just round about, finished. I've just about finished that. I'll see if I can get hold of a chart with the roads on it. Oh, here it is. There you go. So just as a roundup, that's the airspace, all of the airspace, including above 2,500 feet, which all disappears when you get down to 2,499 feet, 11.5 inches. So that's really the airspace you've got to worry about if you're departing and arriving at Blackbush, unless you're Elon Musk and you climb at 1,000 feet per second or something. There's no point in getting that high, really. But if you do want to get that high, there's your airspace, which, as I say, just joins the Class A with the departure and arrival routes for Farnborough. Okay, so that's just about it. I will put a link on this thread after this, and it will be a link to the Blackbush Airport's website. It will be a link to a couple of newsletters that we've done that mention departing and arriving Blackbush airspace, and a MailChimp email we sent out to all of our customers. So I'll reproduce that and put links to that on this, and that's really it. In short summary, departures to the west and the north, business as usual, unless you are departing by the overhead and then Squawk 7010. Departure to the south, controlled airspace transit, you request it when you book out, and you just have to read stuff back and do what you're told. Coming back in from the south, it's not really any different. You used to ask for transit of an ATZ, you just ask for transit of the CTR. Even one of the letters are the same, so it can't be that difficult, can it? And everything else is as it was. So it's not really as daunting as it seems, unless perhaps you live in Red Hill and you want to go up to High Wycombe, then you are going to have to ask for CTR transit. But I would recommend you all, if you haven't done it, that you all do it as soon as you possibly can, and you'll find it's not quite as daunting as it seems. I quite often, when I'm flying down to Dorset, for instance, and go through controlled airspace, because it's not very pleasant flying on a service with Solent just outside controlled airspace and then constantly whinging at you for getting too close to their CTR. Just get a transit and go straight through, and then they'll it makes them happy, it makes you happy. They've got you where they want you. So yeah, so that's about it really. Yeah, it's about half an hour. I will see you at the next one. I will broadcast another one probably next week about something else. We have got one on IMC tomorrow. That's an invite only Zoom one, but have a look at our website on the downloads page and you'll see the April events calendar on there. We're going to put the May events calendar on next week. So stay safe everyone, and I hope you're all nice and healthy. Bye bye.